Hello and welcome to this week's broadcast at the Institute for Voices of Liberty. Today, our co-founder and president, the Honorable Biژen Keyaan, is sitting down with President Trump's Secretary of Interior, the Honorable Ryan Zeinke, to speak directly to the people of Iran. Secretary Zeinke is a former commander in the United States Navy SEALs Team 6. He is a former senator from Montana. He is a former member of the United States Congress and also the author of the book, The American Commander. I am Nicole Sadeghi, and I'm delighted to welcome IVOL's founder and president and our distinguished guest.
Secretary Zeinke, thank you for joining us at the Institute for Voices of Liberty this morning. We are delighted to have you. You are a commander of Navy SEAL Team 6, state senator, congressman, cabinet member, and freedom fighter. You sign off your letters with "The fight for freedom never ends." So welcome, Secretary Zeinke.
Great to be with you on a very important topic because the fight for freedom doesn't end, and our friends that do are in peril. And I'm a big Reagan fan. We need to support and fight for freedom where freedom is in peril. And you see Iran being the center of that. And we'll talk about that today. And I'm excited to have the dialogue.
Looking forward to that. The reason I said you sign off with "The fight for freedom never ends" is exactly this. I'm just going to jump right into it. If I were on the streets in Tehran today and looking back, saying, wait a minute, the United States, 1972, this month, May 30th, in fact, President Nixon goes to Iran and finds a partner in the region and strengthens them in peace and prosperity for many, many years. And all of a sudden, policies change, and Ramsey Clark and Andrew Young go to Paris and encourage an 80-year-old cleric to go to Iran, and the rest is history. The government comes to power taking hostages for the first time in history, and the Iranian on the street says, wait a minute, hostage takers, 43 years of killing American soldiers directly or through their proxies, and wreaking havoc in the Middle East, around the world, all the way to Africa, right in the backyard of the United States in South Central America. And today, we see an administration so eager to, at any cost, get some money to a government that our own State Department ranks at the world's top state sponsor of terrorism. And so eager to do that, you have a State Department that gives visas to supporters and friends of terrorists we have actually eliminated. Soleimani's friend was in LA, touring LA. We give visa to them. And, they're very confused. They see, they're very confused, and they're fighting. They're fighting with their lives, the tyranny that's been just ruling over them for 43 years. And a very confusing picture to them. So you've been in the administration, you're a cabinet member, and if anyone understands national security, I don't know who would that be better than you. How do they reconcile all of this inconsistency? And where's the logic in this? Does it make sense to you?
Well, no, it doesn't. And I think it's important to separate the people of Iran from the regime. In my view, the regime itself is a cancer and has been for decades. We see clear evidence that they are funding terrorism, and they do have a lot of American soldiers. And you look at across the region, they've created I think it's a sense of urgency because when you have at the heart of it a regime that wants to be the center, and to a degree is almost recreating Persia, but in a different view, in that they are a regime of tyranny. No doubt any opposition inside Iran itself is crushed. They don't follow the rule of law. You see the previous Obama administration, I think, a clear and present danger on national security, not only to the United States, but the region, on the Iranian nuclear deal, which the deal was one way. It provided a clear path for Iran to obtain nuclear weapons and delivery platforms legally. And when you've seen, and when the beginning of it is that facilities we weren't able to inspect. They separated the military facilities where they were producing. Their centrifuges, the numbers of it, and clearly intentions are clear to obtain a nuclear weapon, and that changes the dynamics in the regions, considerably. They've also been active in supporting terrorist activities with their neighbors across the region. Their intent is clear, is to dominate the region, but dominate it in a way that historically has been a lot different than what Iran was. Iran, you look at the history of Iran, a proud and very sophisticated history. I have a lot of experience in Iraq, in that region, and I can tell you, of the countries, Iran is the most sophisticated culturally, very deep. The people are relatively well educated, again, sophisticated, but the regime is crushing. And in my opinion, the regime is a cancer. And you have some opposition forces that are emerging, and we should be supporting and aiding those groups. And we should be starving, isolating the cancer of the regime where we can. And we can be successful, but it's not being successful when we continue to fund them, placate their activities, and to a degree support them.
Now, this is really a very confusing picture overall, with all the reasons that you mentioned so correctly and so accurately. Still, the confusion is, with all of that background, what is it that drives Biden administration to be so eager to give terrorists money? Because we know it's all going to go straight to Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad and others. What's the logic behind that? I mean, it's like, what do we say to them? They say, you have this country that you've been for so many years, at least since 1995, May, when President Clinton put all of the sanctions in. You have a problem with them, but you're so eager to give them money, knowing full well the money is going to go to all these terrorist groups. So what are we doing? Indirectly funding terrorism now from the United States, directly, indirectly?
Well, I would say this too shall pass. In my opinion, the Biden administration, both domestically and foreign, has been a dismal failure. If you look at Afghanistan, and I agreed with pulling out of Afghanistan, but on conditions based. And I think the whole world watched in horror, except our enemies, how the execution of the withdrawal of Iran took place. I mean, in a shortened version, the first time in my lifetime that we not only abandoned U.S. citizens, we welded the gates shut in Kabul and willingly and knowingly left U.S. civilians outside the perimeter to defend from themselves the Taliban. This is during the time when the Taliban were stoning to death female pilots we trained and hanging journalists and interpreters out of Blackhawks. Well, we not only abandoned U.S. citizens, but there was also the allies. And the news talks about, well, we had 2,500 troops, but there was thousands of our allies' troops, as well as civilians. It could have very easily been, rather than the loss of 13 Marines, it could have been the loss of thousands of soldiers and civilians, because Kabul was undefendable. That gave a wave through the world that the U.S. is not a reliable ally. The U.S. is not on the side of freedom, and is willing on a objective to withdraw almost without conditions. And then forward with Ukraine, setting a set of deterrents that really was not a deterrent at all. We certainly had the power and the and the wherewithal to set up a set of deterrents that would be successful. We did not. And then we watched the punishing assault on civilians. I think if the world doesn't recognize a war crime as being the intentional targeting of civilians, willful, knowingly targeting and killing civilians, I'm not sure what a criminal that definition would be if it doesn't include that. He's a war criminal. You look at the regime in the Middle East. They have said multiple times the destruction of Israel, the destruction of the U.S., that's their intent. They have launched missiles with destruction of Israel written on the side. They continue, as you point out, to fund terrorist activities and to destabilize the region almost at will. And the U.S. Seems to be, at least this administration seems to be, aiding that. So I would say to our freedom-loving friends everywhere, this too shall pass. I think the Biden administration is a period in the U.S. where we're going to get through. But I think there's a lot of us that respect the Reagan era where you support freedom when freedom's in peril. And there is no question that Iran would be a much better, much powerful country and a country that could contribute to world stability if that regime was not in place.
So what you're saying is there's hope for freedom, that we have an ancient saying, we say light wins over darkness, which makes sense. And at the end, I believe that this constant battle between good and evil will continue, but at the end, good will win. And it's good to hear from you that you also believe that this is a complexity that shall pass. And you're right. I mean, the Iranian people have survived all kinds of invasions, all kinds of atrocities throughout the ages, and they're still there, and they still keep their culture. And I don't think people who are fighting against the Islamic Republic today are intent on fighting Islam. They're fighting Islamic Republic as an institution, its constitution, and its related entities. So I see that, a number of our former colleagues and friends, I saw Victoria Coates, former Deputy National Security Advisor, has called for Elon Musk to do what he can to give satellite connectivity through Starlink to these freedom fighters who are getting killed left and right on the streets, and help them, equip them with communications gear to be able to have a better chance of winning over that darkness. Some members of Congress have also called for reaction, but there is a certain tone of caution that's also a source of confusion, because we really haven't seen very, very strong, not putting military on the ground or anything like that. We haven't seen any strong statements of condemnation of the kind that you're making today. However, we're grateful. I think people of Iran are grateful to members in Congress who voiced their concerns. What do you think can be done really beyond words and encouragement? Is there anything that the United States can do to help people who are just fed up? They don't know how to say to us, to the rest of the world, that they don't want this regime, that they're done with it. I mean, we get feedback from inside Iran every day. They say, which part of our slogan of no to Islamic Republic you find confusing? We've said it so many times. Back in 2009, summer of 2009, they came to the streets and they were shouting to then President Obama, "Are you with us or are you with them?" And of course, their cries fell on deaf ears, and we saw the horror of a young woman who was just walking in the streets getting shot in the heart or in the head and die on the streets. And nothing from Washington, D.C. What do you think can be done, Secretary Zeinke?
Well, there's a lot of support. First is, I think we need to separate the people of Iran from the regime. And it tends to be blended together, but there is a lot of members of Congress that I know and my friends, and many in the previous administration that view Iran in very similar terms than we, and do support an opposition group, do support freedom, and liberty and freedom always win in the end, but there is no doubt a battle, and the Middle East and the world, quite frankly, would be far more stable and prosperous if you had a democratically led Iran that was strong, that was democracy, and people had a voice. And so I think we always have to fight for freedom when freedom is in peril. And the crushing regime of Iran today, I think we should call it for what it is. It is an evil regime. It is set on the destruction of the U.S., certainly Israel, and we should never miscalculate the potential of what it means to have a nuclear weapon and have that held in regional. My opinion is that should Iran develop and hold a nuclear weapon, it will be an arms race. It will be an arms race in a region that has been not particularly stable over the last few decades, and it has a strong potential of going further to nuclear conflict. That should be a wide and a statement that resonates in Washington, D.C. and across the capitals of the world, that scenario is a likely one should they have a nuclear weapon. But it is regime, and I think we need to center put the regime as the center of our efforts to isolate, and do so encouraging opposition for freedom to reign. But there are a lot of members in Congress, a lot of previous administration that understand it, that look at it. And I think going forward, we need to make sure that members of Congress understand the region, are familiar with the sophistication of the culture, and look at where we can penetrate into that to make a difference. And there are a lot of different ways of doing that, but I do think you need to support the opposition, making sure that they can articulate and promulgate a message of hope and freedom, and encourage liberty and the rebirth of democracy in what I think is a critically important region and country and people of Iran.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of hope in what you're communicating to the Iranian people. I mean, they'll be listening to you with a lot of sense of encouragement, and this will definitely give them the strength they need to keep on fighting for freedom. You were in Congress and you left your congressional seat serving people of the great state of Montana to go join President Trump. Now, by the way, Iranians, a lot of them just love President Trump and his policies. That's why. So it's really a good thing to hear from you that there is hope, that there are friends, that this too shall pass. You're on your way back to Congress, Secretary Zeinke, and the question is, you have a lot of colleagues, former special forces individuals who are also in the race, and we hope we all win. But we know you're going to win. You're going to Congress. The question is, I mean, at the Institute for Voices of Liberty, we have an organization, we have a committee that focuses on the future of Iran, and their job is to listen to the people, see what is it that we want, what kind of a future Iran they're looking for, and they're thinking about, putting together modeled after the Syrian opposition and Free Iran Council. This committee has come up with a plan to do that, again, reflecting the wishes of the group of Iranians who have rejected the totality, entirety of the Islamic Republic, and they believe in preservation of the complete territorial integrity and diversity of Iran, and they want to move towards a secular democrat type of government. They're thinking about this formation of this Free Iran Council. You're going to Congress, you have friends there. Would Iran be on your agenda? And if yes, would you think there would be a sense of support for such a diverse group of people who would be the alternative, so that the United States government and others can sit down with them and talk to them instead of being so bent in Vienna to
well, I think it's incredibly important to have a voice of an opposition, and that opposition stands for freedom and liberty and democracy, and allowing the full potential of the Iranian people to be realized. You have a country that is so rich in culture, that is sophisticated, that is well educated, that is being repressed. And in that region, it could be an economic engine for good. And I think it is important to have an opposition voice that's unified, that's diverse, that is also in tune and communicates with internal groups within that country. And I think such organizations provide a venue to articulate and promulgate the message. You're right. People don't fight unless they have something to fight for, and a guide of a goal and an objective they can rally around. It's difficult to fight when you don't have a voice. It's difficult to fight when you look at there is no chance. But groups that are a coalition and based on liberty and freedom and recognizing and contributing to the potential of Iran, I think is incredibly important, as well as to train and to educate not only members of Congress, but influential leaders across the board. You mentioned Elon Musk. Here's a gentleman in Ukraine that moved his satellite system and provided communication to an entire country that was undergoing, a very serious assault. So you have one individual making such a big difference. Talking about it, informing and educating those type of people also is incredibly important. And I do absolutely support groups, again, that articulate an opposition to a very tyrannical, repressive regime as the Iranian cleric regime is today. And I think it's important. I think it's important for that voice to be heard. And such groups are that vehicle for the voice to be propagated and heard.
Very grateful to you. People of Iran are very grateful to you and your friends who are sending a clear message that, the crazy policies that you see from time to time are perhaps the result of the clash of, a partisan fight seeking power, and it will pass, it will change. Midterm elections are ahead of us. The color of the United States House of Representatives, for sure, perhaps the Senate is going to change, and your voice is going to carry so much weight because of your experience and things that you've seen, Mr. Secretary, are very unique. You see the world, you know the world in ways that others only read in books at best, or watch in movies. So you've seen the reality, and your experience is going to add so much to the United States Congress. I'm sure the community here, as Americans, my own personal importance and priorities in national security of the United States. Yes, my blood is Iranian, but my soil is the United States. And I've sworn more than once to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Iranians are going to start rewriting their own recipe for freedom, and they appreciate all the support. I'm sure that a lot of people in the Iranian American community want to hear what you have to say directly. And,
well, leadership matters, and leadership changes the course of history. You saw Iran go to a tyrannical regime, and that leadership that they have today, is repressive and again squashes liberty. Leadership, good leadership, strong leadership that believes in the principles of every human has a voice with dignity and freedom. And, in the United States, we value our Constitution of freedom. We believe those rights are inalienable. I think we should promulgate, those freedoms and those rights to other people, because it's a successful model. It provides prosperity. It provides innovation. It provides the people choices, self-determination, limited government in our lives, and protection of rights and freedoms. Those tenets are as important in the U.S. as they are anywhere in the world. And the U.S. should be and can be and will be a beacon for that freedom, and to provide help, assistance, training, education, but provide also a path for countries that do suffer from a leadership that is, in this case, a tyrant and repression, a path forward. How do we take back our country? Do we have support? Are there people out there, like you and I, like many, many members in Congress, that are willing to fight for freedom? And, we began with saying the fight for freedom never ends. And that is so true today. Freedom is earned, and a democracy is a fragile instrument. It takes participation and work. But the payoff of freedom is absolute.
So, Secretary Zeinke, you're going to be invited to give people the opportunity to hear these words directly from you. It energizes them, it galvanizes them, it gives them the fuel to move forward and keep fighting. Because, as you said, we agree in our own ancient culture that the light wins over darkness. I want to thank you on behalf of the Institute for Voices of Liberty, and also the Iranian people that we hear, we talk to every day. We want to thank you and say that the people of Iran, as you said so elegantly, are going to be the best friends with the United States that sticks to its Constitution, to those principles, that believes that freedom is universal. It's not, that we want all the freedoms for ourselves, and when it comes to other people, we believe in different standards. So you're very, very helpful. Thank you so much for spending time against the very busy schedule that I know, campaign season. And please consider coming to our beautiful sunny Southern California anytime, and get together with people who would like to hear you, Secretary Zeinke. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And I think the dialogue is important because the region is important. The people of Iran are important. Democracy and freedom is important. And to provide hope and a path forward for freedom, I think benefits the world. And certainly, I think the goal of all the leaders should be a stable, prosperous Iran, that one enjoys freedom and democracy. And those of us in power or in leadership positions should do everything we can to support that. So I'm encouraged. I think the regime itself in Iran is under tremendous pressure, and we should continue to apply that pressure and provide paths and avenues for freedom-loving groups to succeed.
Thank you so much, Secretary Zeinke. Wonderful to be with you. As always, every time I'm with you, I get a sense of energy and fuel to keep on fighting. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being a patriot. You are indeed a patriot and a good friend.
I'm very humble. Thank you.
Let's win this battle, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.